Between August 2020 and July 2023, a dramatic shift unfolded across 4 African nations: Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Each saw their governments overtaken by military forces, with leaders pledging national renewal and sovereignty. But one of these nations, Burkina Faso, has become the most unsettling for Western powers, particularly the United States. The reason? A young, uncompromising leader named Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Since taking power, Traoré has committed to lifting Burkina Faso out of poverty and sharply reducing its dependence on foreign aid. His leadership is defined by defiance, both against extremist threats and international meddling. And it's this defiance that has drawn the attention and growing concern of Western governments. According to reports, there have already been 18 known attempts on his life, a statistic that underlines the volatility and danger surrounding his leadership. But why does a relatively obscure leader of a small West African nation evoke such fear in the corridors of Western power? Before we explore why Captain Ibrahim Traoré has become the man America fears the most, make sure to subscribe to One World News and hit the bell icon so you stay updated on the global power dynamics shaping our world. To understand this, we must revisit the historical and geopolitical patterns that have shaped Burkina Faso, and how Traoré is systematically breaking away from them. In 1960, the region, then known as Upper Volta, gained independence from France, part of a broader decolonization wave sweeping across Africa. Yet political freedom did not translate to economic autonomy. Upper Volta, like many other former colonies, remained tethered to its former colonizer through aid, trade, and military ties. The first president, Maurice Yamogo, quickly centralized power, forming a one-party state reliant on France's economic backing. His extravagant spending and political repression sparked national unrest.
Au nom du droit naturel de l'homme à la liberté, à l'égalité et à la fraternité, je proclame solennellement l'indépendance de la République de Haute-Volta.
By 1965, the military intervened. On January 3, 1966, Lieutenant Colonel Sangoulé Lamizana seized power, abolishing democratic institutions and beginning nearly 2 decades of military rule. Though initially seen as a reformer, Lamizana soon mirrored his predecessor's authoritarianism, entrenching a pattern of elite rule backed by external powers. It was in this turbulent landscape that Thomas Sankara, a charismatic army captain, began to rise. His radical ideas, centered on anti-imperialism, women's rights, and self-reliance, resonated with a public tired of subservience. As prime minister and then president following a 1983 coup, Sankara sought to completely redefine the nation. He renamed the country Burkina Faso, meaning land of upright people, and launched ambitious reforms: land redistribution, local food production, health campaigns, and the expulsion of exploitative foreign influence. Sankara's governance was not just revolutionary, it was threatening. His outspokenness against the IMF, World Bank, and Western hegemony set off alarms in global financial centers. He famously warned, "He who feeds you, controls you," a stark indictment of Africa's economic dependence on aid. Though beloved by his people, Sankara was assassinated in 1987 in a coup led by his former ally, Blaise Compaoré, widely believed to have Western backing. Compaoré reversed Sankara's initiatives and restored strong ties with France and the West. For 27 years, his rule was characterized by corruption and elite enrichment, all under the guise of stability. But Sankara's spirit endured. His image graced murals, protests, and songs across Africa, and he became a symbol of a defiant African future. In 2014, Compaoré's attempt to extend his rule ignited a mass uprising. Protesters torched parliament, forcing his resignation and escape. For a time, hopes rose again. A transitional government formed, but chronic insecurity, especially from jihadist violence, soon returned. The state struggled to govern, particularly in rural areas increasingly dominated by armed groups. By January 2022, frustration peaked. A coup ousted President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore. Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba assumed power, promising to restore stability. Yet under his leadership, extremist violence worsened, and the military's confidence in his ability dwindled. In September 2022, a second coup brought Captain Ibrahim Traoré to power. At just 34 years old, the youngest national leader in the world. What followed was not merely a transfer of power, but a political and ideological rupture that sent tremors through West Africa and beyond. Traoré entered the presidency with an urgency and decisiveness that had been noticeably absent in previous leadership transitions. While most transitional leaders tend to rely on vague promises of reform, Traoré began implementing changes at an unrelenting pace, signaling not just a shift in leadership, but a transformation in governance itself. His military background, honed on the front lines of Burkina Faso's counterinsurgency operations, lent him immediate credibility among both rank-and-file soldiers and ordinary citizens, many of whom had grown disillusioned with decades of political stagnation, bureaucratic paralysis, and foreign dependency. Traoré immediately prioritized securing territory from extremist groups, reorganizing and decentralizing command structures within the army, and providing increased logistical and financial support to local self-defense militias. These moves signaled not only a commitment to restoring physical security, but also a larger mission: to fundamentally redefine the distribution of power and responsibility within Burkina Faso's borders. More significantly, Traoré made it a central mission of his administration to confront, and ultimately sever, Burkina Faso's lingering post-colonial entanglements. Within mere weeks of taking office, he began publicly questioning the country's entrenched reliance on France and other Western powers for military protection, economic assistance, and political counsel. French forces, who had maintained a long-standing presence in the country under the banner of counterterrorism cooperation, were quickly and decisively ordered to leave. Traoré contended that these foreign militaries had not only failed to bring peace to the region, but had, in fact, become permanent fixtures that profited from the persistence of instability. This bold and symbolic expulsion of a major Western military partner sent a shockwave through international circles. It was a statement of intent aimed directly at Washington, Paris, and Brussels. Burkina Faso would no longer be a client state or a geopolitical pawn. This rejection of Western tutelage triggered immediate backlash on the global stage. Western diplomats, defense analysts, and international think tanks quickly warned of rising instability, warning that Traoré's actions could create a vacuum easily exploited by jihadist groups or rival powers. Concerns were also voiced about Traoré's potential realignment toward Russia, China, or other non-Western actors. The United States, which has long maintained strategic interests in the Sahel, including intelligence cooperation, drone operations, and access to critical mineral resources, viewed this geopolitical pivot with deep unease. Burkina Faso's location in the heart of West Africa makes it an indispensable node in regional security architecture, trade corridors, and resource extraction networks. To lose influence in such a key country, especially to a nationalist leader who openly courts alternative global partnerships, set off alarms across the Pentagon, State Department, and allied intelligence communities. But Traoré's influence extends well beyond conventional statecraft or battlefield gains. He has rapidly become a cultural and symbolic force, arguably the most significant since the era of Thomas Sankara. Appearing regularly in public clad in combat fatigues, often flanked by ordinary citizens, market women, and young fighters, Traoré projects an image of accessibility, humility, and strength. His unfiltered speeches speak directly to the frustrations of a generation of Africans who feel betrayed by decades of failed leadership and foreign exploitation. Many of his addresses, delivered in clear, forceful language, have gone viral across Francophone Africa, with youth across borders chanting his words in solidarity. He doesn't simply critique institutions like the IMF or US foreign policy. He articulates an entirely different worldview, one grounded in Pan-African unity, local production, and sovereign control over land, labor, and resources. This ideological defiance is precisely what makes him such a threat in the eyes of the West. Traoré is not just difficult to influence. He represents an existential challenge to the post-colonial order that has allowed Western nations to shape African economies, militaries, and politics for decades. He speaks openly of building a new financial architecture unbound by the CFA franc, a currency controlled by France and widely seen as a neocolonial relic. He imagines a West Africa united not by externally imposed regional blocs, but by voluntary coalitions that serve African, not Western, interests. These ideas, long dismissed as fringe or radical, are now being implemented through state policy and military cooperation. Traoré has also proven adept at forging strategic partnerships with like-minded leaders in the region. Under his leadership, Burkina Faso has joined a growing alliance of Sahelian countries, particularly Mali and Niger, led by military figures who also reject Western control. These governments have begun to form a de facto regional bloc, one that envisions shared military coordination, economic self-determination, and diplomatic solidarity against external coercion. The prospect of a broader anti-Western coalition taking root in the Sahel, fueled by resource nationalism and grassroots legitimacy, terrifies Western policy planners. It suggests a potential domino effect where other African nations might follow suit, leading to the unraveling of a regional order long maintained through military bases, trade incentives, foreign aid, and political pressure. For the United States and its European allies, the stakes are enormous. Beyond ongoing military operations, American interests in the Sahel include intelligence sharing, the protection of mining operations, especially for critical minerals like uranium, lithium, and gold, and the management of migration routes that directly affect European domestic politics. Traoré's government has already begun to reassert control over key economic sectors, including mining, and has moved to renegotiate or terminate contracts with foreign firms deemed exploitative. If Burkina Faso successfully proves that it can manage its own resources and maintain stability without Western aid, it could serve as a dangerous precedent, one that might inspire other African nations to pursue a similar path of independent development. Equally unsettling for Washington is Traoré's domestic popularity. Unlike many coup leaders, he has not had to rely on brute force or censorship to maintain control. His rule has been characterized by a groundswell of popular support, particularly from youth groups, labor unions, and rural communities. Thousands have taken to the streets, not to oppose him, but to celebrate his leadership and demand the full expulsion of Western troops, embassies, and NGOs seen as vehicles of foreign interference. Murals featuring his face alongside Sankar's are now common in major cities, while school children recite his slogans in classrooms. In a region where many leaders cling to power through fear, Traoré's popularity gives him unprecedented flexibility to act and makes him harder to undermine. What America fears most is not simply the rise of another anti-Western strongman. It is the emergence of a credible and popular alternative model for African governance. A vision that breaks with dependency, that calls for sovereign development and regional solidarity, and that seeks to create new alliances on Africa's terms. Traoré is not a stopgap leader. He is young, strategic, and deeply ideological. He is not content to govern a single country. He is actively trying to reshape the political future of an entire region. And unlike many predecessors, he is doing so with speed, with focus, and with the full backing of a mobilized population. As Ibrahim Traoré continues to chart Burkina Faso's path towards sovereignty and renewal, the world watches with a mix of hope and trepidation. In the corridors of power from Brussels to Washington, his name is increasingly uttered with concern, not because of what he has torn down, but because of what he is daring to build. If you find this story eye-opening and want to explore more untold narratives from Africa and beyond, stories that challenge the mainstream and uncover the deeper currents of global power, make sure to like, subscribe to One World News, and turn on notifications. It helps the channel grow and ensures you won't miss the stories shaping Africa's